Hello and welcome to this special live panel discussion for White Riot. My name is Adam Woodward. I'm the digital editor for Little White Lies magazine. We've got a really great panel lined up tonight. Just introduce everyone quickly that you can see on screen. So we have journalist and broadcaster Kate Hutchinson, who's going to be leading the discussion. We have director Rubika Shah, Rock Against Racism co-founder Roger Huddle, Jenny Hamada, who is the director of events at All Points East Festival. We also have writer, filmmaker and musician Celeste Bell, who's going to be playing some music for us at the end, and is the daughter of Poly Styrene from X-Ray Spex, who famously performed at the 1978 concert in Victoria Park. And please stick around afterwards. We've also got a pre-recorded performance from Sister Cookie. And just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to hand over to the guys in a minute, and Kate will get the conversation going. I think we're going to have about half an hour or so of Q&A, and we're also going to be collecting questions. So whether you're watching this on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, if you use the hashtag White Riot, you can just leave a comment, and if you have any questions for anyone, we'll make sure we hopefully get around to them. I just wanted to sort of add a quick personal note, going back to when I first saw this film, which is now, feels like about a decade ago, but was actually only in October last year at the BFI London Film Festival, where it won the Grierson Award for Best Documentary. It was a film that I was actually turned on to by one of the producers, contributor Ed Gibbs, who is a contributor of Little White Lies and someone I've known and worked with a little bit on and off over the years. And yeah, he'd kind of mentioned the film to me sometime before, I think when it was in the relatively early stages of production, and it sounded right up my street. And being a music fan and also being someone who lives just down the road from Victoria Park and has spent quite a lot of time there, and in fact I've been to a few like All Points East events recently in the last couple of years. I think this was definitely one I was looking forward to, and it's quite an amazing experience really to be transported back to 1978 and to see and experience this concert that happened, which I've only really heard stories about and seen footage of, and I think this film does a really brilliant job of putting that into a more kind of modern context, and obviously the message really behind the film and Rock Against Racism, it really rings true as it did back in the 1970s. And the film is going to be released theatrically by Modern Films later in the year. But obviously with cinemas being closed for the time being, it's currently available as previews. So you've got basically until the end of Sunday evening to watch this online, and you can do that at modernfilms.com and littlewhitelies.com. So please enjoy the film when you get a chance to see it, and enjoy this discussion. I'll hand over to you now, Kate.
Thank you, Adam. I'd just like to say this is a fantastic way to spend a Friday night. Has everyone got that Friday feeling?
Definitely.
Yes. Okay. Brilliant. Well, I guess let's start off with with right from the beginning. Rebecca, you're a documentary maker. You're a storyteller. You're constantly finding new stories and being excited by stuff. What was it that appealed to you in particular about this story? Why did you feel like this was the story you wanted to tell?
Well, it was actually a really quick decision. It was a story. We found out about the story 5 years ago, and we were looking. I was just watching clips on YouTube, and I'm really into archive. And I found the footage of the Clash playing at Victoria Park at the Rock Against Racism gig. And at the time I thought, God, this looks like a really big concert, and I didn't really know much about it. But as I started to dig deeper and deeper, I soon found that it wasn't a gig. It was a massive gathering of 100,000 young people from all over the UK who'd come to support Rock Against Racism. They'd marched from Trafalgar Square to Victoria Park, in support of this cause. And, for me, I felt that was such a big moment, and a big moment in youth culture that I didn't know, and I felt, this story has to be told. So I started digging deeper. I found that actually Rock Against Racism had started only 2 years previous to that. And it had been started by just a bunch of people, young people, just like me and just like everyone else, like kind of everyday people. And that really piqued my interest.
just people like Roger. There's a brilliant moment in the documentary where someone says, we weren't superheroes, we were ordinary people. Who were the people behind Rock Against Racism, Roger?
Well, they're not quite ordinary. I've got to take these headphones off. It wasn't, I mean, I was a political activist. I've been active throughout the whole 60s, mainly, anti-Vietnam War campaigns, etc. Red Saunders, a co-founder, was a photographer and a theatre actor. But then, we were ordinary. We was anti-racist, ordinary anti-racist, mainly socialist. Almost everyone was a socialist who started it off. It was
a very grassroots movement, wasn't it? I mean, we're talking, this is obviously way before social media or anything like that. You know, it seemed like it was a very, very DIY movement, Roger.
Yes, it was. I mean, it was guerrilla action more than anything else. And somebody wrote to us after the carnival from America saying, can you send us film clips? And I said, film clips? You know, they ain't got no film clips. I hadn't even got any photographs, for God's sake. You know, so the stuff that Rebecca's found is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, even a picture of me in the print shop, which I've never seen in my life. So that was good. But we just came together because we were so angry. We were so angry with what was going on and what Eric Clapton had come out with in Birmingham in '76 when he started giving support to Enoch Powell, which was very dangerous in the middle of the film is fantastic at capturing what the feeling was like in the mid '70s. So that was it, you know. But I was a soul fan. I mean, I'm a jazzer. I come from Blue Beat. I come from the '60s. So all this stuff in the late '70s was a real mind blower.
Celeste, you were nodding your head when Roger was talking about Eric Clapton. Mm-hmm. It's quite surprising, isn't it, that this movement was started not necessarily just because of the, you know, National Front gaining numbers, but because of what famous people, what popular musicians like Eric Clapton had been saying, the racist statements they'd been making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised as well in the documentary. Rod Stewart was mentioned as well, and I wasn't aware of actually before that he had those kind of racist views as well. So I knew about Eric Clapton, but Rod Stewart was a bit of an unpleasant surprise.
Yeah, was it you, Roger, who was saying that I would never listen to him after that?
I haven't. I mean, I used to see him at Cook's Cleat when he was Rod the Mod Stewart, and he used to play with Brian Auger's Trinity, and you know, he used to backcomb his hair and be really funky. And I really liked him, but I couldn't believe he'd come out with that shit, honestly.
Yeah.
Was this sort of movement one of the first sort of ways of marking out the divide between the sort of generations, the hippie generation that had been, or the sort of soft rockers, and then the punk generation coming in?
I think so, but also you've got to include reggae. You've got to include the rise of black music in England. I mean, with Aswad, Steel Pulse, Black Slate, Matumbi, whole number of bands all came out of that, but mainly because of Bob Marley turned towards a political voice in his songs. And so it was those two things. It was reggae and punk. All our soul boys, we didn't know what was going on, you know, but I mean, musically, but I think that was that coming together, but you have to include, you know, all the reggae stuff and the blue beat and all what came out around ska and everything. That's just as important as punk in this kind of jettison of the kind of Top of the Pops. What was that other dreadful English band that used to be from Scotland and wear tartan scarves? I can't remember their name. Bay City Rollers.
Bay City Rollers, yeah.
You know, all that rubbish that was dominating the charts. That was all dumped. Yeah.
I was going to come on to this later, actually, but while we're on the topic of different genres and different musical styles, I mean, people, sort of very broadly speaking, might tend to think about musical scenes in that era as being quite tribal. You know, you're into this or you were into that. Was there actually a surprising amount of camaraderie among the punks, the reggae bands, the ska bands, the jazz bands, the funk bands?
Do you want me to come on that? It was difficult. I think, you know, I got my two-tone T-shirt on, and T-tone. I think it was difficult. There was. It comes out in the film really good. I can't remember who says it in the film about this whole thing about going to somebody else's area, somebody else's community. It was very difficult to get people to travel to hear bands. It was quite difficult. The Asian music generation around Bangor and everything didn't materialize within inside the movement, although it was there and it fueled the Bradford Asian youth and the Southall youth groups, and it fueled that. But our fuel was somewhere different. I think genres were broken, and I think the thing about the period is it brought the musics together. What we came out of the music was a multicultural music, and an English multicultural. It already existed in America, but an English, British multicultural music that included all the influences: black, white, Asian, except green, pink, yellow, whatever. There's a great thing in the film when a DJ, master DJ, says, "Yeah, I play green music, pink music, and all that." It's great.
I have to say, sort of holding my hands up in ignorance here, I'd never heard of the band Alien Culture, who feature in the film, a South Asian punk band who were very involved in the Rock Against Racism gigs, and my tiny mind was blown. Rubika and Jenny and Celeste, what was the thing that you found most surprising about either the making of the film or the watching of the film?
How little security there was at the gig. Those poor guys at the front of the stage. I watched it and was just like, oh my God. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's the fact that these sorts of big music festivals like we do and that happened back then, they've always been about bringing people together. But the thing I love so much about the film was that lots of people know about the gig, and people know about Victoria Park as being the People's Park, and you know, it's had the suffragette rallies. It's really historical. But I think not as many people know about what led to the gig. It wasn't just a gig that was put on in Victoria Park to, you know, to talk about, you know, racism and the effects on society. It was a whole lead up to it. There was campaigns that came before it. It was, you know, Rock Against Racism is huge. And it was really, really good to see how it led to the stage of being such a big show, because it goes to show that putting on a festival and bringing people together is great, but there's more that events and more that music can do, just apart from just putting on a diverse lineup, which is something that I hold really true to myself in terms of like year round, the team and the management of the festival. Like diversity it's not just one thing, it's not just a tick box, it's all of us. Like we all have, you know, I mean, I'm a first generation immigrant, our friends, our family, it's not just a thing, it's everyone, it's our team, it's our friends, it's our family, and it's most certainly our fans. So it's interesting to see how far we've come, but unfortunately how far we've not come at the same time in terms of society. So it was a really lovely mix of that, and I think it was really, really well put together in terms of the lead up.
I wondered whether you might be having palpitations at the bit where I think somebody says, oh, we told the authorities there'd only be 500 people, so we didn't have to pay for Portaloos.
You're the reason why we have really strict license stuff now. Yeah, it was brilliant. Oh God, imagine if we could just do that now. Like, oh, we don't need a fence or any toilets. She didn't have any toilets. That would make our lives so much easier. I think we should go back to those days.
What about you, Rubika? I mean, you capture that run up that Jenny was talking about so beautifully, with so much energy. But I mean, there's a really deep unease. I mean, it's very chilling, a lot of that footage. Did anything sort of surprise you, or did you learn anything new or find anything particularly interesting when you were sort of pasting that all together?
Well, I was going to say really quickly, actually, the Portaloo bits is one of my favourite bits in the film. It still makes me laugh every time I watch it, especially on the big screen. It's brilliant. It really just comes in at the right time. But in terms of making the film, definitely. Wading through, I mean, the times were just, it was such a violent time, wading through, hours of footage which just depicted, what you guys see in the film, and what everyone sees in the film is actually, a slim, trimmed down version of everything that's available to us that we looked at. And it was a really violent time, and so that was really surprising for me to learn just how violent it is, because I think until you see it on screen, it has a different effect to when somebody tells you about it. So we've all seen documentaries where people tell you about how violent it was and about the race issues that were happening at the time, but when you actually see it for yourself and you hear what some of the people are saying and the language that they're using, and just horrendous, it really hits home in a really sad way.
Definitely. I think that there were a lot of very hard stories in there. The newsagent, the shop owner who'd fought in the war, and he'd had his teeth knocked out by having stuck stones through the window. I think it was, it's really powerful stuff. There's also quite a lot of shocking stuff in there, like Susie Sue wearing a swastika armband. What was all that about?
I think that was the unfortunate side of punk, really. A lot of punks, like prominent ones like John Lydon and Sid Vicious and Susie Sue, they were kind of flirting with the aesthetics of fascism. And I think it actually started with David Bowie, I believe, who kind of was an admirer of certain like fascist art and photography. And I think there was it was the most shocking thing basically at the time. And a lot of punk was about posturing and posing and showing off and shocking people for the sake of it. And putting a swastika on your arm was a way, it was guaranteed to shock, your parents' generation, your grandparents' generation, and pretty much everyone in society at the time. But it was really problematic, obviously.
Yeah, it's still really shocking. Roger, what was that? How tricky was that to manage? You were putting on punk bands. A lot of them had National Front followings. What was that like, trying to sort of manage all of that?
It was really, really hard. We never asked Susie to do a gig because she wouldn't drop the swastika.
Wow.
We talked to her a lot about dropping the swastika, and she wouldn't drop it, so we wouldn't book her. The same as with the Jam, they always insisted at having a Union Jack behind their gig, so we wouldn't deal with it. Even though the Jam actually proved to be much more consistent than Susie was. I think there was two sides. There was an optimism and there was a pessimism, and that fascist iconography really fed into the pessimistic side of what punk was. The no future, the no hope. There's no horizon for us. Society's left us alone. And then there was the other saying, well, I haven't got a job now, but I'm going to fight for a job. I'm going to fight for a future. And I think that's what we try to capture, that side of fighting for a better world, fighting against racism, rather than acquiescing, sticking a safety pin through your nose, sticking a swastika on your arm. That we found that, and also in terms of the Black community, that escape into that pessimism wasn't possible for them. They was under the cosh of racism every day. So it became problematic, but in the end, we just couldn't deal with it. So we didn't deal with it.
Do you mean that there was a time when you would try and sort of get the people who were maybe on the edge and a bit sort of politically unsure and try and bring them into the fold? But then there was a time when that got too much. Is that what you mean?
I think the film brings it out fantastically. There was a really famous gig with Misty and Roots and Sham 69 at the London College, and the London Dockers put on the security. It was a very, very complex thing, but we needed not so much. We wanted Jimmy Percy to say that he was an anti-racist, and in the end, he did. He went on Top of the Pops, and he in the middle of his song, he said, "I want you to see this," and he held up his guitar, and there was a RA sticker on the guitar, and it was very difficult. There's always that problem. There was a thing called Skins Against the Nazis, which was a flow out of school kids against the Nazis. So there was a number. We did split the audience, and that was important. In terms of the audience, we always tried to win the wave of us. In terms of performers, we didn't. We didn't try to win them over.
I wanted to ask about the Clash, because in the doc, they're very cool and swaggering and posturing, I thought. And I wondered, did you get a sense, Rubika, of them being quite difficult to win over, or did they take a while to sort of come and stand and be up front?
I think Joe Strummer's politics have always been in support of, rock against racism, but I think that the whole story about them, coming on board, actually there was a few different stories when we interviewed everybody, so we had to kind of piece it together, with the different voices, and because we couldn't include everybody from Rock Against Racism, we could just include a few voices. We came to the conclusion that we did. But I think they, from what I heard and from talking to different people, I think they thought it was a bit of a joke at first, or they approached it, didn't maybe take it seriously. I'm not sure if it was all the whole band, and actually Roger could probably talk to this a lot more because he was actually there on the ground. But I think that it was the manager who was the one who was joking around.
Is it you nodded then, Roger? Yeah,
there's a guy called Bernie Rhodes. He was our manager. He was an absolute nightmare. The band were very difficult. It comes over in the film really good. Red had a deliberate approach. Katie and myself went to see them. They took the piss out of us. They made us feel little, especially Katie. I was a bit more long in the tooth, so it bounced off me a bit. They thought it was like Woodstock, and they thought that was bad. In the end, I think the film captured the real truth of it perfectly. But the person who got them to finally do the carnival was Tom Robinson's guitarist. He was the one who actually went and saw them and said, stop messing around. Why are you being prima donnas? And he and Danny got them to come and do the gig. They just brought out White Man in Hammersmith Palace, so they were really up. But then we found out afterwards that they actually used their performance in the film for a film called for another film, which we didn't know about, because they wouldn't come off the stage, and in the end we had to pull the plugs on them because they just they didn't want anybody else to come on after them. So they were difficult, but they were the Clash,
Sounds like things could have got pretty hairy. I'm wondering how seismic that gig was. Celeste, do you remember hearing stories about this, show from your mother? She also performed. Was this kind of a gig that was very much kind of in your consciousness as one of the legendary performance shows?
It was a very significant gig for my mother, for lots and lots of reasons. And, we're making a documentary film at the moment about my mother's life. So Rock Against Racism is a big part of that. And she was, very keen to be involved and to support it. She also played a lot of political kind of events in her short career with X-Ray Spex. There were lots of gigs at the Roundhouse at the time that she got the band to perform at, pro-abortion, anti-sexism, and anti-racism was obviously for my mum, it was really important because my mum was mixed race. She was not white. She had experienced that kind of racism herself growing up in South London, when being a mixed race children experience really horrible abuse constantly, and so did her mother, and so it was something that was really close to her, and so it was definitely a proud moment, and it was also significant for her in a more personal sense, because it's when she revealed her shaved head. She shaved her hair off, and she revealed it at the Rock Against Racism gig in Victoria Park. So it was just like super significant and important for her for like many different reasons.
Yeah. Oh, I look forward to hearing more about your doc also in the future. I've got to shout out temporary hoarding, because temporary hoarding is the sort of a bit of the secret star of the doc, wouldn't you say, Rubika?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I've got my copy as well at home.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, the style of it is just the style is amazing. The design is just like completely incredible. That must have been so much fun to make that fanzine.
It was definitely, we, as soon as we saw the fanzine, we knew that, you know, this is the kind of almost the language of the film, that we wanted to include this in the film, because, you know, it blew us away. And, you know, if anybody knows about fanzine culture, you know, just opening up these huge, big, you know, big newspaper size, you know, fanzines that, you know, essentially were like kind of homemade, but they didn't look homemade. They're just rich in color and vibrant in you know, the design. And I think what captured our imagination was that, you know, it wasn't just graphics for art and graphics for fashion and music, but it also incorporated, you know, the political stories of the time, the things that were, you know, on people's minds about some of the political issues that, you know, were affecting people, and often, you know, political issues that weren't being reported by the mainstream press. You know, there was stuff in there about you know, just what people would class as, you know, small stories. And so we decided right at the beginning that we wanted to take that and we wanted to incorporate it into the film. It's kind of like, I feel like it's the glue for us in White Riot.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Roger, about what it was like to make that?
Well, it was crazy. I mean, in the end, at the beginning, it really was a collective. We would all gather in the SW print shop. David Widgery, the writer, Red Saunders, the kind of dreamer, imaginative, cultural warrior. I was there as a kind of a paste-up artist, graphic artist. There was a guy called Bob Hum down in the basement who would blow up anything and make an image of anything. So we developed the whole idea of using typewriters and blowing typewriter language up and cutting out images, and the film covers it really well. And then Ruth and Sid joined the print shop, and they brought a different sensibility to it. And it was incredible to do. And also, right from the beginning, I think the second issue, we had a thing about Belfast and the troubles in Ireland. We had an article about the sexual repression of youth in Germany under Hitler. The way that young boys had to went to bed with gloves on so that they wouldn't touch themselves, and the whole repression that is part and parcel of the fascist ideology. We really brought out, and there was a wonderful writer, Lucy Toothpaste. So yeah, it was great.
Big up Ruth. I love Ruth. As well. In the first copy of Temporary Hoarding, and this comes up in the doc, somebody said, one of the writers, that music breaks down people's fear of one another. Do you think that's still the case? Celeste, do you want to take this one, or Jenny?
Celeste, you go first.
Yes, I think it is in many ways. I think, as you mentioned earlier about, you know, kind of the tribalism of music, and then how sort of later on, like with the punk, in the punk era, and sort of after sort of Rock Against Racism, there seemed to be more of a, you know, a blurring of different sort of, you know, genres, and people were coming together, you know, kind of merging different styles and influences, and then that brought people together as well in terms of different communities. So I think we've the, you know, nowadays that's actually kind of, that is the norm. You know, there's not, you can't think of one kind of genre of music that's not really heavily influenced by another. And you know, I think what was happening back then led the way, you know, led the way to where we are now, where, you know, you can be an eclectic artist with, you know, really, really different kind of influences in terms of music. And then those influences often have cultural influences as well. So, you know, world music, for example, when I was a kid, you know, it wasn't really cool to listen to world music. It was something like my grandmother listened to, you know, like the Gypsy Kings. I remember she loved the Gypsy Kings, and my mum was like, no, that's not cool. But now that is, you know, it's absolutely, it's everywhere. You've got artists like Rosalia, who's like doing flamenco music, and that is in the mainstream, and she's like blending flamenco with reggaeton. And reggaeton, which is like a Latin American kind of version of sort of merging of reggae and hip hop, is like super known worldwide. It's probably the most popular music globally, and so world music has become global music. And I do think like boundaries and also borders have kind of broken down in music, and that's a great thing.
Thank you, Celeste. Does anyone else have anything to add on that point before we've got a question that's come in from a viewer. Exciting. This is the future. Well, James Jewell, shout out to James Jewell. They ask, do any of the panel think that given what's happening right now in Minnesota, that musicians and artists in general should be stepping up to use their platform and work to challenge what's happening? Or are we in an age where the voice and work is actually irrelevant and not even required? Are there any acts or artists that you think are doing this effectively at the moment? That came in from Facebook. Should musicians be using their platform? Are they enough? And who's doing a good job?
I can speak on a sort of, I guess, general term from what I see. I think there's loads of musicians, of course, that use their platform for amazing good and to promote really positive messages. My only concern is that musician's voice can only go so far, and it's usually reaching the fans of the musician. And I think where our expectation of them has to kind of not stop, but we can't put all our expectations on musicians to fix everything with their voice, because there's only so far that can go. There's all the people that aren't listening to that music or that have a different political ideology that, you know, the message might not reach. So while they do have an absolutely fundamental important voice, it's only one of a multitude of things that have to happen in order for things to change.
That's a very good point.
I think there's an enormous amount of work being done though, by poets, jazz musicians, rappers, in America particularly with Black Lives Matter. I don't think you can have a situation like we did in the 70s, because the historical moment's different. But what you can have is a lot of artists stepping up, doing stuff, and there is a lot. There's More Mother from Philadelphia, who's doing the most out there, angry, furious. You know, there must be so much stuff in America against Trump. We're not hearing it though. It's the same as before. You don't hear it because the airways, except for the streamers, but the kind of the official airwaves, it doesn't get on it. I can't see anybody on Radio 1 playing anything of any meaning at the moment.
I certainly can't see them playing anything by More Mother. I love that you brought up More Mother. Everyone should be checking out More Mother. They're an incredible artist.
Yeah. Kendrick Lamar, Comanche, Washington. There's a whole number of people really doing fantastic, angry stuff about what's going on, particularly in America. In this country, it's almost certainly there's a complete renaissance of English jazzers at the moment, and they are Sabaka
Shabaka Hutchings.
Hutchinson is doing incredible stuff with the voice, the ancient voices. So yes, the guy is right on the way. Is right and wrong. The music's there, but it's not going to have the power to break through this morass of idiocy that we're living in.
Celeste, you're nodding there, Celeste.
Yeah, I think that's also partly maybe the fault, not the fault, but the problem with the internet and how that's kind of affected music in general. And so, you know, I would say there's so much music out there that's amazing and you can access it really easily. But on the other hand, it's really hard for artists. I guess there's just maybe too much in a way, and there's so many options. It's really hard for artists to kind of reach a more mainstream audience, I think, today, that if, you know, unless they're very commercial. So popular music is super hyper commercial today, more than ever. But on the other hand, you have all of these amazing alternative artists doing really interesting things, but for some reason they're not able to cross over in the same way that they were able to cross over, I would say, in the 70s, 80s, even 90s. So there are people doing these, you know, are making, you know, politically conscious music, but it's not like reaching, you know, a mass audience. And why that is, I do think the internet's probably got something to do with it.
I feel like artists are utilising, you know, their voices on social media in a way like never. But I just saw an hour ago Taylor Swift tweet something incredibly strong about some comments that Trump made recently, and I thought, God, that's just brilliant, because she's got so many followers, and you know how great that she's finally using her platform in that way. I just want to come back to something that, Roger, you said. You said that the Rock Against Racism Carnival, the march from Trafalgar Square to Victoria Park, you know, was of its time, was of a moment. Do you think that anything like that could happen again? An event like that?
Not with all the restrictions. As Jenny was saying, you know, there's so many restrictions now. We did a 30th anniversary carnival in Victoria Park. And, you know, you had all the porter cabins, you had all the security forces, you had the guys checking that you didn't have any alcohol on you, you had all that crap that goes with a modern outdoor gig. So we couldn't do it. And when I said at the beginning, we were guerrilla action, you know, but it wasn't just a carnival. A few months later, there was the carnival in Brockwell Park with Elvis Costello and Aswad. And then there was the carnival in Manchester with the Buzzcocks and Steel Pulse again. And then in '81, there was the carnival in Leeds with the Specials and Misty in Roots. So the movement that was personified by 78 actually continued for the next 3 or 4 years. And you couldn't pull that off now. But doesn't mean that if we don't use our bloody imaginations, we can't pull off similar. I mean, what we need to do is find another way of doing it. You know, that's what we need to do. I mean, I don't know, maybe we all stand 2 meters apart along the whole length of the M1, slogan saying, fuck Boris or something. I don't know.
Can I add something there as well? I think maybe the audience that you need to reach has also changed slightly. It's not necessarily the youth at that time was split between some, you know, like, I don't know, 50% of the youth were full on racist NF supporting, you know, like neo-Nazis. I don't think that's necessarily the case today with the youth, with the very young. Maybe we need to be reaching the more middle-aged and elderly, you know, age group in society, the ones who are voting for Brexit and Boris and all of these things in really large numbers.
I think that's a great point. and I wonder how you might do that. Rubika, we've got a couple more minutes and a couple more questions from people watching, so thanks to for those. Why was this an important story to tell now? Why is it important that we keep telling these stories?
I think from my perspective, I think there were so many parallels. Actually, when we started making the film 5 years ago, it was it was a really interesting story, and actually there weren't as many parallels as there are now. But you know, Trump hadn't been elected, and then he was elected during the journey of making this film. Brexit hadn't happened; it hadn't even been the referendum hadn't even happened. So, as during the process of making the film, as these events were happening, it felt more and more relevant. It, you know, it was in the zeitgeist, and it helped to kind of shape our ideas. You know, me and my writing partner Ed Gibbs, you know, we were kind of, it was an evolving beast in that sense. But you know, from a personal perspective, I love archive stories. You know, I love looking back, especially contemporary history, I guess, as one would call it. And you know, looking for those moments in popular culture and seeing, you know, what happened then. And actually you find that there's so many of these cyclical stories, you know, something that happened even 10 years ago that might be happening now. And you know, quite often you can find a bridge, or maybe it is a bridge that you found that just because of your interest in that era. So yeah, I think it's really exciting, that is.
Definitely. And we've got a great question from Sunil Chauhan that's come through. It's for you, Rubika. And I agree with this. The film has a tremendous momentum. They asked, did you want to replicate the rhythm of punk, or is that just your preferred style? And they also ask, what is one music documentary everybody should check out?
Yeah, the tone actually was really important. You know, we wanted it to, you know, kind of sweep you up and kind of spit you out at the end of it, so you don't have a lot of time to think throughout, because you know, it is quite hard hitting. You know, right from the beginning we kind of land you in that world, and you know, I felt that was really important because you know, we wanted to keep it short and sharp, I guess, in documentary feature doc terms. You know, it's 80 minutes, and so I'm really glad that comes across, because you know, tonally that's spot on. You know, it was punk. You know, the story that we told was actually, you know, it's quite a small story in the sense that, you know, there was so much happening in the late 70s with reggae, with punk, with young people, but we chose to tell this you know, one story, and so we wanted to do right by that, which was, you know, at the heart of this film is a story about young people and the choices that they have to make. And it's something that transpires as we go through the narrative, with having to make your choice as a young white you know, person. You know, do you want to follow the National Front, or do you want to support Rock Against Racism? So you know, that influenced us in our thinking behind that. And in terms of a music doc film, gosh, there's so many great docs. The one that always sticks to out in my mind, and actually it's quite different actually, but I love his work, is two docs actually by Brett Morgan, probably Montage of Heck, the Kurt Cobain doc, absolutely fantastic, and then his documentary before that, Crossfire Hurricane. I'd say that was quite influential in thinking about tone and how you can use tone to think about your story.
Yeah, great suggestions. Has anyone else seen any good music docs lately, apart from White Riot, of course?
I love the one on the Blue Beat label, which really captures that kind of mid 50s to mid 60s turn from the kind of passivity of the early music around after post-war America, through Blue Beat to hard bop, and then coming out the other end as a really firm music with the great people like Wayne Shorter and stuff. So yeah, the movie on the Blue Beat film I've seen recently was fantastic. Apart from I really did love White Riot as well, although I didn't think there was enough. There should have been some Misty and Roots in there somewhere.
What about you, Jenny?
There's a few. I mean, there's obviously the ones that stick out the most. The Amy Winehouse one was really, really, I watched that on a day where I was already feeling quite down. And then I think it just stuck with me so much because it was just something, it was a side of the story that I didn't know as much. And same with the Whitney Houston one. And I know that they're quite personal stories. They're not as much around kind of the era that they were living in, but in terms of a female journey, that didn't end well, those are two that really, really stuck with me. Just kind of on a personal note. The first music documentary, not a documentary, I ever saw was Spinal Tap. So that one's from the beginning. But that's not a documentary, I think.
What about you, Celeste?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Jenny about Amy. I think that was just a really strong documentary, and I really liked the use of archive in the film. So it's all kind of archive, and it just works really well. And what else? I saw the Michael Hutchins film quite recently, and I was quite impressed with that as well. Again, the use of archive was just you know, lots of intimate moments and like home videos, and I also learned, you know, some things about Michael Hutchins that I didn't know, but he had this terrible accident that affected his ability to taste and smell, and that really affected him psychologically, and I had no idea about that. So it's all, you know, it was I think any documentary, music documentary, where you could actually learn something about the lives, you know, personal lives and those kind of intimate moments, I think it's always going to be a good one.
Well, that's a good way to end on my last question, which is, Rubika, did you learn anything that you didn't know that was interesting, surprising or shocking about any of the artists that feature in the doc?
Oh wow, I mean that's a big question. I learned so much. I think the Rod Stewart thing, going back to what Celeste said earlier, and you know that I think was a big thing that I learned about, because I definitely knew about Eric Clapton, obviously knew about Bowie, and so hearing about Rod Stewart was quite disappointing, really.
Well, I don't want to end it on a disappointing Rod anecdote, but there we have it. Look, you know, for people watching, you know, White Riot is a fantastic music doc. The scene where you're, I don't want to get this wrong, but you're sort of collaging some stuff, and then maybe there's a bit where you look at the TV screen and then it goes in and then you land in a cab. There's like a scene where you take us through lots of different, I'm not technical, sorry Adam, if there's any Little White Lies readers watching, I am sorry, but there's
recreating the arrests, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just brilliant things that you do with the form, so you know, please everybody do go and watch it. Thank you so much to our fantastic panel, Rubika, Roger, Celeste, and Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was so interesting. Do stick around, everyone else on Zoom, because this is how we roll now in 2020, because we've got an after party. Of course, it's Friday night. So please crank up the volume, pour yourself a drink, get comfortable, because Celeste Bell is going to be playing a few Rock Against Racism inspired tunes. DJ Celeste Bell in the house. And after that, there's going to be some exclusive new music from Sister Cookie, the musician known as London's Black Rose of the Blues. And she's going to be taking us on a bit of an eclectic excursion, I think, into the roots and fruits of Black music. So that's all from me. I've been Kate Hutchinson. Thank you for listening and watching. And you can still catch White Riot online until the 31st of May on the Modern Films website. There's going to be loads more virtual previews throughout the summer until the theatrical release in September this year, which is very exciting. So over to you, Celeste. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to play Strange Things, first of all. It's a great reggae track. So this is a punky reggae party. And Strange Things references Friday night. So that's why I chose it. Here you go.
Stranger things happen on a Friday night. Girls meet boys and lots of hugging and kissing under the golden moon that shines a silver light. Oh, I'd like to be one of them, but I'm like a wandering sheep on this island, with no one to love me, with no one to kiss me. That's why I say, someone please take mine and let us go. I keep on thinking, I wish it was me.
Okay, so the next one that I'm going to play is by the Tom Robinson Band, and it's kind of iconic track, Glad to Be Gay.
This song is dedicated to the World Health Organization. It's a medical song, and it concerns a disease whose classification according to the International Classification of Diseases is 302.0. The British police are the best in the world. I don't believe one of these stories I've heard about them raiding our pubs for no reason at all, lining the customers up by the wall, picking out people, knocking them down, resisting arrest as they're kicked on the ground, searching their houses, calling them queer. I don't believe that sort of thing happens here. Sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Hey, sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Pictures of naked young women have fun in tidbits of Playboy, page 3 of The Sun. There's no nudes in gay news or One magazine, but they still found excuses to call it obscene. Read how disgusting we are in the press. The Telegraph, People and Sunday Express. Molesters of children, corrupters of youth. It's there in the paper, it must be the truth. Try and sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Hey, sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Don't try to kid us that if you're discreet, you're perfectly safe as you walk down the street. You don't have to mince or make bitchy remarks to get beaten unconscious and left in the dark. I had a friend who was gentle and short. He was lonely one evening, he went for a walk. Queer bashers caught him, kicked in his teeth. Was only hospitalized for a week, and he still bears the scars. Sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Hey, sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. And sit back and watch as they close down our clubs, arrest us for meeting and raid all our pubs. Make sure your boyfriend's at least 21, so So only your friends and your brothers get done. Lie to your workmates, lie to your folks. Put down the Queen's, tell anti-queer jokes. Gay lives ridiculous, join their laughter. The buggers are legal now. What more are they after? Tell them. Say if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Hey, say if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. To be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. Hey, sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy this way.
So I should just say this playlist is on Spotify. If anyone wants to listen to it, and it's Punky Reggae Party, created by Celeste Bell, and I've made it public, so you should be able to find it. It's just 35 minutes of tracks by artists who either played or in some way is related to the general theme. The last track I'm going to play is by Sham 69. So Jimmy Percy obviously was quite an important character in this documentary, and his story was quite an important one. This track is called If the Kids Are United.
Hello, mate. All right? Yeah, I'm all right. For once in my life, I've got something to say. I want to say it now, but now it's today. The love has been given to drive and enjoy. So let's all grab and let's all enjoy. Just take a look around you. What do you see? Kids with feelings like you and me. Understand him, he'll understand you. For you are him, and he is you. And the kids are united. They will never be divided. And the kids are united. They will never be divided. Freedom is given. Speak how you feel. I am the freedom. How do you feel? Like a light on my face, but not to my heart. If we stand together, it will just be the start. And the kids are united. They will never
Okay, so I'm just going to finish with a track by X-Ray Spex, of course, Identity. And then it's just about 2 minutes long, this song. And then we've got Sister Cookie, who has a performance coming up straight after Identity. So please enjoy, and it will be ciao from me.
Hi, it's Sister Cookie joining you live and direct-ish from from my living room. Thank you so much for staying with me and hanging out for this White Riot after party. And yeah, this is awesome. But I'm going to do a few songs for you, and we're going to start off with this one. I mean, I guess it kind of ties into things because I wrote this song basically about, I don't know, social divides and all that kind of stuff. And that's sort of kind of leads into why we're gathered here today, dearly beloved. I'm making light of it. Maybe I've gone a bit stir crazy with the lockdown. It's not a funny subject, but here we go. I'm better at singing these things than I am talking about them. So I better hop to it. This song is called You're Never More Than 7 Feet Away. From the many to the few, it makes no difference what you do. You don't notice them, though you see them every day. You may be living in a palace or a dungeon. Just remember what they say about love, and that no matter where you are, you ain't never more than 7 feet away. Yeah, yeah. Bam, 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 bam. If your tap was made from glass and you throw stones at the other half, you better watch it that them stones don't ricochet. You gotta eat it and have it too in abundance, as long as you remember what when the days are gray in this hotel where you can be anywhere. You can go anywhere. You can be anyone. Gotta hide no matter how far you can run. You may be living in a palace or a dungeon. Just remember what they say about love, and that y'all never more than 7 feet away. Bam, 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 bam. Yeah, yeah. They say it may change you. They say it will be the hardest thing you ever do. They say it will make or break you. They say it will be the thing that makes a man out of you. Now I've listened to your stories of how you grew up tough, and I am so proud of you for never giving up. Well, he tried his best to run you down, but it wasn't good enough. No, it wasn't good enough. Try hard not to worry, although that's easier said than done. Well, I know how much you worry, because you're not the only one. You were twice the man he ever was. So hold on, because the sins of the father are not the sins of the son. No, 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 no. Any fool can be a father, but it takes more than a seed to grow a tree. I know you might have had to do some learning, yeah, on the job now. But from where I'm standing by your side, you're doing pretty good to me. Now I know you won't admit it, because you're too much of a man. But I've been here through all these years, and I truly understand. Man, I've seen our baby look at you, and I've watched you every day. Yeah, yeah. Man, I just wanted to say, I said I tried are not the sins of the son. I said to try not to worry, although that's easier said than done. Oh, I know how much you worry because you're not the only one. You were twice the man he ever was. So hold on, because the sins of the father are not the sins of the son. No, 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 no. You can have my love, baby, but it don't come cheap. I will make you laugh one day, and the next I will make you weep. You can have it on a plate, daddy, but you got to eat it all. You got to take the bitter together with the sweet. When your back's against the wall, you can have my heart, baby, but it don't come cheap. Sometimes I'm a nightmare, yeah. Then other times I'm sweet. You are a part of me, just as I belong to you. Thus I give you all of me, even the bits that ain't so good. You can have my body, baby, but it don't come cheap. 'Cause I will fill your head with memories that will haunt you in your sleep. Every night I steal with you straight out of the sweetest dream. I'm your Achilles heel, your kryptonite to me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. My name is Sister Cookie, and hopefully I'll see you somewhere very soon. Stay safe, everyone.